So earlier this week, for those of you who are on our email list, you may have gotten an e-note from me. It was a Thanksgiving kind of thing, celebrating Thanksgiving, but also celebrating like all of the things that we've done with the communications team over the past 12 to 14 months. I mean, we started with a full audit last year. You don't need to know all this, but I was just sharing all of that. And in those many links that was in that email, we also rolled out something that's been approved by council, and it's our new communications policy. It's 8 pages long, single space, and I know everybody already read it. I know not everybody gets excited about things like that, but some, nerds like me do. And one of the things that's in that, since I know all you read it, I'm just going to be highlighting it for you, is the journalistic 5 W's for every event, everything you try to plan at church, so to speak. The who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. Everything needs one of those, right? Who, what, when, where, and why. And we say in the policy, which I kind of like, it says, we strive to lead with mission and ministry first in order to help people understand why we do the things we do, the why behind every event, and the impact it can have on your own spiritual life. In other words, the why should always come first. At least that's what the policy says. It may even be what the scriptures say today, but we'll get to that in a minute. But here's something by way of confession. Here's something about how I think staff and others here at the church, leaders, often do things, and it's not exactly like that. Maybe this is even how you do things around your own kitchen table or in your own family or with your own friends or in your own workplace. We never usually start with the why. We start with the when. It's the calendar. It's the calendar, right? It's the calendar. If you want to get people together, you got to work on the... That was just to see if you were awake. You got to work on the calendar. We start with the when. When is it? What day? What time? Is there a conflict with anybody else's schedule? Can we all get together at the same time? If you can get that coordinated, then maybe you can worry about the where. Is it going to be on church campus? Oh, no. Is there a conflict? Which room do you want to use? How many people are going to be there? Are there any conflicts that we might need to shift people around? Then we might figure out, okay, who we're going to invite. Is this family with kids? Is this going to be teens? Is this going to be senior adults? Is this going to be everybody? Who's the who? Maybe if we get all those logistics, because logistics are important, right? Maybe if we get all that, we might get to the why. But we all know that you can have the best why in the world, and it means nothing. If you don't have the when and the where, nothing's going to happen. You plan a bunch of stuff, falls flat. And maybe right now, between now and Christmas Eve, here at the church, we have an amazing number of wins to come and enjoy. And by the way, I love that, so I don't want to stop that. That's a lot, right? There's Advent wreath making. We just heard about that. That's a little bit after this service, so we can go down the hall and do some of that with the kids. There's an Elves Night Out on December 5th at 5:30. There's a Love Feast next Sunday night at 5, so I hope you'll come to that and hear the brass band and all of the beauty in the sanctuary. And then you can go across the street and we can do Christmas karaoke. Hey, right? Shout out. 6:30. On the 1st and 3rd in December, we have a mental health first aid. The Well's going to be helping to do that. You can come to those this next couple of Wednesdays. And then on the 21st, Lemonade with Mary and Joseph. I mean, that sounds fun to me. And then Christmas Eve, 4 services, right? 11, 3, 5, 11. It's a lot of wins in the calendar. And that's just your church calendar. You haven't even added yours in there, your personal one, your family one, school concerts, staff or office parties, family gatherings, shopping deadlines, travel arrangements. Let's not forget meal prep schedule, because meals are, everybody's going to fast until January 1, right? It is something to do in Advent, I'm just saying. I mean, we're not going to probably do it. It's just, December can be an exhausting parade of wins and wheres, both at church and in our personal lives. And if we're not careful, we could execute all of those perfectly. We could do them all in succession with precision, and we could lose the main thing, the why. Why are we doing any of it? Here's what strikes me about these scriptures this morning. Jesus says, I'm coming again. And Jesus says, I'm coming again, and nobody will know when. Nobody knows when the day or the hour will come, says Matthew. Not the heavenly angels, not the Son. Only the Father knows. Notice this. You can't put that one on the calendar. You can't tell everybody, hey, save the date. Jesus is coming again, and it's here. You can't avoid any scheduling conflicts with rooms or other things in your calendar. And this actually troubled early Christian scribes. You'll notice in some of the early manuscripts, if you were to do that kind of research, some of the scribes just kind of conveniently left this part out. It's didn't like it. If you read early church fathers, you'll find people like Origen and Athanasius and Ambrose, and they didn't like it either. They wrestled with this. Some of them even wrote treatises. It's this can't be. Jesus has to know the when. I mean, how could it be? I mean, we believe God the Father and God the Son are both fully God. Jesus is fully divine, which has to mean that Jesus is fully omniscient, which means all-knowing. So how could Jesus know the who and the what and the where without knowing the when? But according to Matthew, angels don't know. Not even Jesus knew when. But here's what we do know this Advent and Christmas. We do know the who, I hope. Or at least I hope we're striving to know the who. For his name is Jesus. And to know a little bit about the who that's coming again in glory, you have to know a little bit about the who came the first time in Bethlehem. The one who is described as Emmanuel, God with us. The one who's called the Prince of Peace, the wonderful counselor, the mighty God, the bright and morning star, the bread of life, the living water, and yes, the light of the world. The one that Matthew says is the human one, the righteous judge who will return to judge the living and the dead. And Isaiah's vision shows us who this one is, the one to whose mountain all the nations will stream upwards so that we can be taught God's ways, the ways that help settle dispute not with violence but with wisdom. This is the one we're waiting for. And listen to what he brings according to Isaiah chapter 2. Instruction will come from Zion. The Lord's word will come from Jerusalem. The word instruction in the Hebrew literally is Torah. And that Torah refers to the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Scriptures. But also the deeper meaning of Torah is direction, guidance, teaching, instruction, teaching about ways to live, ways to love, ways to thrive. And notice what Isaiah says in chapter 3. Many nations will go and say, come, let's go up to the Lord's mountain, to the house of Jacob's God, so that he may teach us his ways and we may learn to walk in his paths. Notice this, church. They came to learn. That might be something to do this Advent. Come to learn, not come to consume, not to acquire, not to grab our share and go home, and to stream up the mountain. That's counterintuitive, right? That feels like that's against gravity. That's against the current. One could say not only is it counterintuitive, it's countercultural. It may be counter to the ways of the world around us, both in and outside of the holiday season, to be taught God's ways. When everything in this season around us seems to teach us the opposite, we hear things like, come buy our stuff, come consume our content, come fill your calendar with our events. And you know, the brighter, the shinier, the more you just need more. But Isaiah's vision has nations voluntarily climbing a mountain to be formed, to be shaped, to be taught, to walk in new paths. And here's what I think God teaches when we climb the mountain. They will beat their swords into iron plows and their spears into pruning tools. Nation will not take up sword against nation. They will no longer learn how to make war. Notice something here, right? To practice war, people had to learn war. To practice violence, people had to learn violence. They will no longer learn how to make war. Maybe maybe that's what we need to do this Advent. We need to unlearn some things. If we learn violence, if we learn that, then maybe we need to unlearn that first before we can learn how to practice peace. If we learn fear and anxiety and we just kind of soak it up in the culture around us, maybe we can unlearn that and learn how to trust God with everything that comes. If we learn how to consume, maybe we can unlearn that so we can learn how to grow in generosity and sharing. We must unlearn some things. If we learn how to hate and how to throw shade, maybe we can unlearn that so we can learn the ways of love and forgiveness and prayer. We can learn God's ways, which we know are justice without violence and peace through wisdom and resources redirected to flourishing instead of diminishing life abundant. And then the what becomes more clear. God wants to teach us a completely different way of being human. So maybe we should think of Advent not just as a season of preparation, but a season to unlearn some stuff, to become students all over again. Unlearning the ways and practices that do not lead to life so that we can learn or maybe relearn the instruction that flows down from the mountain, the teachings that come from our rabbi and teacher, Jesus. Why is Jesus coming again? And why should we care? And why does any of this matter in these next weeks of December, the last weeks of this year? Because I believe God is reclaiming and transforming all of creation, and we're invited to participate in that right now, not in a few weeks and not in a new year in 2026, right now. So the question then becomes, what do we do while we wait? How do we live the why while we're navigating all the winds in our calendar? And I think Matthew and Isaiah both have the answer. And it's pretty simple, and I'm sorry for all the students in the house that didn't want to hear this right around the holidays, but the answer is go to school. Go to school. Climb the mountain. Learn God's ways. Put your mind around God's curriculum. Come, house of Jacob, let's walk by the Lord's light. Matthew says, stay alert, be prepared. I don't think those are contradictory calls. They're the same call. Stay alert by learning. Be prepared to practice God's ways by learning what God teaches. And what are God's ways? And just a few verses later in Matthew, the next chapter, we learn a little bit about what this Jesus is going to expect when he returns and comes again. He's going to say, when I was hungry, you either fed me or you didn't. And when I was thirsty, you either gave me water or you didn't. And when I was sick, you either visited me or you didn't. And when I was in prison, you either came and prayed and spent some time with me or you didn't. And when I was a stranger, you either welcomed me or you didn't. And these aren't arbitrary rules. They're curriculum that God's giving us. We learn generosity, church, by feeding the hungry. And that's why I think Doorstep's so important here at Eden Street. That's part of the reason we emphasize it all the weeks of Advent, and also our Christmas Eve offering is going to go to Doorstep Ministries. Help people stay housed in their homes and apartments, not just in a few weeks, but all of the time, keeping them from being on the street. We learn how to welcome other people, even in a season where people are being scattered by actions around us, scattering families in our community. We learn not to embrace fear, but to embrace the stranger, the immigrant. For in doing so, we welcome Christ. We learn presence, visiting the sick, going to the jails and the prisons, showing up for people that society has written off. We learn prayer. And I don't mean just the rushed table prayers. I love to pray around the table. I love to sing the prayers around the table. We've got a bunch of them at the Baker House. We're going to sing them this week and the weeks coming. But what does it mean to also be more intentional in our prayer this season in our solitude, with our spouse or with our families? What does it mean to also practice silence, to learn how to listen to God even as we open the scriptures together? We're going to invite you in just a few weeks for 2026. We're going to kind of double down on the teachings of Jesus, and we're going to invite everybody to read the Bible in a year, starting January 1. So just get ready. Learning is coming if you're ready for it. We learn how to be peacemakers by beating our swords into plowshares. And that doesn't just mean sees somewhere where there's violence or war. It means in our own relationships, in our own families, in our own workplaces, practicing de-escalation, practicing patience, practicing deep listening, even when there's conflict and you don't want to do that. Every Advent, the world offers us a competing curriculum. It tells us to learn to want more. It tells us to curate our holidays perfectly and make sure it looks and smells the way it should for it to be perfect. It tells us to consume our way to joy when we know that's not how joy comes. It tells us to learn anxiety by getting everything right and in its proper place. But God invites us to a different curriculum altogether today, to climb a mountain. So when all this stuff comes at you so quickly in December, ask yourself, what am I learning? Are you learning what the commercials are teaching you, or what the Instagram posts are trying to share, or what cultural anxiety is kind of putting in your heart? Or are you climbing a mountain to learn God's ways? And remember the truth about Advent. We don't know when Jesus is coming, but we do know Jesus, or at least who he says he is and who we've experienced him to be, the one who shows us how to be truly human. And what he's teaching us today is mercy and justice and welcome and generosity and peace. And we know why it matters, because what the world looks like when God's instruction flows from Zion is that it goes to all nations, where swords become plows and nations no longer learn war but peace. So stay alert. Don't anxiously watch the sky, but actively watch for Christ in the hungry, the stranger, the sick, and the prisoner. Be prepared, not with predictions and calculations, but with lives shaped by mercy and generosity and peace. Walk by the Lord's light. Not someday when things slow down, or next year when it gets easier, but right now, slow down. Today, tomorrow, in the middle of your December craziness. And while you're navigating 100 winds in the calendar between now and Christmas Eve, at church and beyond, don't lean into this season exhausted and empty, but alert and awake to God who is breaking in and breaking out and breaking through, so that every gathering can become an opportunity to practice what we're learning. And every meal can be an encounter, a chance to embody the Prince of Peace who's making all things new. Jesus is coming, and we don't know when, but we do know who Jesus is. And we know his ways. So I invite you, climb the mountain, learn God's curriculum, and remember why all of this matters. Not so we can just get through December, but so that we can become the people God is teaching us to be. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.